Picture this: a 21-year-old factory worker from Chicago is lying motionless in tropical undergrowth, watching 18 Japanese soldiers fire from a concrete fortress that has already killed a dozen Americans. His commanding officers are stumped. Direct assault means death. Flanking is impossible. Artillery would kill the hostages trapped inside. And then, in a moment of geometric clarity, this young paratrooper sees what nobody else can see. He understands that courage alone will not solve this problem. What happens in the next 4 minutes will save 160 lives, earn him the Medal of Honor, and prove that the most lethal weapon in war is not firepower but precision thinking. But here is what makes this story devastating. Manuel Perez Jr. will never know any of this. He will die before the medal reaches him, killed by a sniper's bullet 29 days after his moment of brilliance, on a day when the fighting should have been over. This is the story of February 13, 1945, the day a single soldier solved an impossible problem at Fort William McKinley, and the cruel mathematics of war that followed. The morning of February 13th begins at 8:17, with the sound every infantryman dreads: the mechanical hammering of a Type 92 heavy machine gun opening fire at close range. Company A of the 511th Parachute Infantry Regiment has been moving through the grounds of Fort William McKinley for 43 minutes when the Japanese position reveals itself. The pillbox sits low in the landscape, its firing ports barely visible through the dense vegetation that covers this corner of the old American military reservation. What looks like a simple concrete bunker is actually something far more dangerous. A reinforced fortress with walls 8 inches thick, a roof that can withstand mortar fire, and firing ports 18 inches wide positioned to create interlocking fields of fire that turn the surrounding terrain into a killing ground. The first burst catches 3 paratroopers in the open. 2 go down immediately, their bodies crumpling in that boneless way that tells experienced soldiers everything they need to know about survival. The third makes it to cover but leaves a blood trail in the grass. The Japanese gunners are disciplined, firing in short controlled bursts rather than the panicked automatic fire that wastes ammunition and overheats barrels. These are not desperate holdouts or demoralized stragglers. These are professional soldiers who have turned this pillbox into a precisely engineered death trap. Company A goes to ground. The paratroopers press themselves into shallow depressions, behind tree trunks barely wide enough to provide cover into drainage ditches that offer concealment but not protection. The immediate problem is obvious. They cannot advance and they cannot retreat without crossing open ground that the Japanese machine guns command completely. The deeper problem becomes clear within minutes. This is not just a defensive position. The Japanese are holding something inside that pillbox, something that makes the standard solution, calling in artillery or air support, impossible to execute. Intelligence reports have indicated that Fort William McKinley contains captured Filipino civilians, possibly American prisoners of war, and the pillbox complex has been modified to hold hostages. The concrete structure that makes it nearly impregnable from the outside also makes it a perfect prison from the inside. The Japanese have constructed a geometric paradox, a fortress that cannot be destroyed without killing the people it holds, defended by soldiers who have nothing to lose and no intention of surrendering. Lieutenant Morrison, the platoon leader pinned down 30 yards from the pillbox, understands the tactical situation immediately. He has fought through the jungles of Leyte, jumped into the combat zone at Tagaytay Ridge, and spent the last 11 days pushing through the increasingly fanatical Japanese defense of Manila. He knows what happens when you assault a prepared position head-on. The mathematics are brutal and simple. The Japanese have interlocking fields of fire, reinforced protection, and clear sightlines. Any frontal assault will cost at least half his remaining platoon, and even if they reach the pillbox, breaching it without killing everyone inside is nearly impossible. Flanking maneuvers are out of the question. The pillbox has been positioned with the tactical precision that characterizes Japanese defensive doctrine throughout the Pacific Campaign. Every approach angle is covered. The terrain offers no dead ground where troops could advance unseen. For the next 27 minutes, Company A tries every conventional solution. A fire team attempts to suppress the pillbox with rifle fire while another squad maneuvers right. The Japanese simply shift their firing ports and cut the maneuvering element to pieces. 4 more men go down. 2 attempt to crawl close enough to throw grenades, but the Japanese have cleared the approaches to exactly this range, creating a killing zone that extends 35 yards in every direction. The grenades fall short, their explosions doing nothing but announcing American positions and drawing more precise fire. A request goes up the chain of command for heavy weapons support. The response comes back within minutes, negative. The risk to civilians is too high. The 11th Airborne Division is under strict orders to minimize collateral casualties in urban areas. Fort William McKinley, though technically a military installation, sits on the edge of Manila's residential districts. The wrong shell could kill dozens of innocent people. By 900 hours, Company A has been pinned down for 43 minutes. 12 men are confirmed dead. Another 8 are wounded badly enough to require immediate evacuation. The Japanese continue to fire in disciplined bursts, conserving ammunition, rotating firing positions, demonstrating the kind of tactical patience that has made them such dangerous opponents throughout this campaign. They are not trying to wipe out Company A, they are trying to fix them in place, to create a static situation where more Japanese forces can maneuver, or where the Americans will eventually make a mistake born of frustration and desperation. This is when Private First Class Manuel Perez Jr. begins to study the problem with the focused intensity that his squad mates have learned to recognize. Perez is the kind of soldier other soldiers notice. Not because he is loud or aggressive or particularly large, he stands 5 feet 9 inches tall and weighs 147 pounds, but because he possesses something more valuable than physical presence. He thinks clearly under fire. He sees patterns where others see chaos. He has been on point more often than any other rifleman in his squad, not because he volunteered, but because his platoon sergeant keeps putting him there after watching him navigate complex terrain without getting people killed. Perez has been observing the Japanese firing patterns for 31 minutes. He has counted 17 distinct firing ports, tracked the rhythm of the machine gun bursts, noted which ports fire simultaneously and which alternate. He has mapped the dead zones where the geometry of the structure creates blind spots in the Japanese field of fire. He has measured, with the precision of an industrial worker accustomed to tolerances and specifications, the exact distance from the closest covered position to the pillbox's northern face. 23 yards, perhaps 24. Close enough that a strong arm could reach it with a grenade, too far to survive the crossing under direct fire. But Perez is not thinking about a direct approach. He is thinking about the pillbox itself, about the engineering decisions the Japanese made when they reinforced this position. The firing ports are positioned for maximum coverage of the approaches. This means they are positioned at predictable angles, geometric necessities dictated by the need to cover specific fields of fire. The ports cannot cover the immediate base of the pillbox structure itself because the concrete walls create blind spots directly adjacent to the exterior. This is standard defensive design. The assumption is that no enemy can reach that blind spot while under fire from the ports above. Perez sees that this assumption contains a flaw. The Japanese have designed their defense based on conventional assault tactics, suppressive fire, maneuver elements, direct approaches under cover of supporting weapons. They have not designed for a single soldier who is willing to accept mathematical certainty of death during approach in exchange for mathematical certainty of success once he reaches the structure. What Perez envisions is not courage, though it will require that. What he envisions is a trap built on geometric precision. At 9:14, Perez moves to Lieutenant Morrison's position. The conversation is brief. Morrison later reconstructs it in his after-action report with the kind of detail that suggests the words burn themselves into memory. Perez describes his plan in the flat, matter-of-fact tone of someone solving an engineering problem. He will cross the open ground to the Pillbox base using a specific route he has identified where the firing port angles create a 4-second window of minimal exposure. He will not attempt to destroy the Pillbox. He will not breach the structure. He will instead position himself at the northwestern corner where the firing port geometry creates a 2-foot blind spot. From that position, he will use fragmentation grenades to create what he calls the choice. Morrison asks what that means. Perez explains with the patience of a factory worker describing a production process. The Japanese inside the Pillbox can fire outward through their ports, or they can defend against grenades coming through those same ports, but they cannot do both simultaneously. The 18-inch firing ports that give them protected positions for shooting also create 18-inch openings for grenades to enter. If the Japanese stay at the firing ports to shoot, grenades will kill them. If they retreat from the ports to avoid grenades, they cannot shoot. Once they retreat from the ports, they cluster in the interior space, making themselves perfect targets for grenades thrown into a confined concrete box with no cover and nowhere to run. Morrison understands immediately. This is not suppression. This is not a frontal assault. This is not even particularly heroic in the traditional sense. This is applied violence as engineering. Perez has identified a geometric flaw in the defensive structure and calculated a method to exploit that flaw with mechanical precision. The plan is brilliant. It is also likely to get Perez killed during the approach, a fact both men acknowledge without dramatization. Perez asks for covering fire time to the Japanese reload cycles, and for smoke grenades deployed to create visual confusion without obscuring the route he needs to follow. He strips off everything except his rifle, ammunition, and grenades. He carries 8 Mark II fragmentation grenades, each one weighing 1 pound 5 ounces, each one containing 2 ounces of trinitrotoluene surrounded by a serrated steel casing designed to fragment into lethal shrapnel. He carries his M1 Garand rifle with a full 8-round N-block clip and 4 additional clips in his belt. He does not carry water, rations, medical supplies, or personal effects. This is the loadout of someone who understands that the next 4 minutes will determine whether weight matters at all. At 9:17, Company A opens suppressive fire on every visible firing port. The volume is not meant to destroy or even to hit anything in particular. The volume is meant to force Japanese heads down for 6 seconds. Smoke grenades arc toward the Pillbox from 3 directions, their deployment carefully staggered to create rolling concealment rather than a single cloud that will dissipate. And Perez runs. Later, several paratroopers attempt to describe the crossing. Their accounts share a common element of disbelief. Perez does not sprint in a straight line. He does not dodge or weave dramatically. He moves in a specific pattern, angling his approach to minimize exposure to the firing ports he has already mapped. When Japanese fire erupts through the smoke, he is not where the gunners expect. He covers 23 yards in 4.6 seconds, a time several witnesses mark on their watches, because the speed seems impossible for a man carrying 32 pounds of grenades and ammunition. Perez reaches the northwestern corner of the Pillbox and presses himself against the concrete. The covering fire stops. The smoke begins to clear, and the Japanese inside realize with what must be dawning horror that an American soldier is now outside their fortress in the one position where they cannot shoot him without exposing themselves completely. The geometry has inverted. The firing ports that protected them are now vulnerabilities. The walls that shielded them are now a cage. What happens next lasts 3 minutes and 47 seconds, timed by multiple witnesses and corroborated in the official after-action report. Perez begins with the northernmost firing port. He pulls the pin on a Mark II grenade, releases the spoon, counts 2 seconds to allow the fuse to burn down, and throws the grenade through the 18-inch opening with the accuracy of someone who has spent thousands of hours on factory production lines where precision means the difference between quotas met and quotas missed. The grenade detonates inside the concrete structure. The explosion in a confined space is catastrophically amplified. The pressure wave alone is enough to rupture organs. The shrapnel ricochets off concrete walls at velocities that turn the interior into a lethal blender. Japanese soldiers scream. Some of the screams end abruptly, others continue. Perez moves to the next firing port, another grenade, another explosion. He works with methodical efficiency port to port, creating a progressive collapse of the defensive position from north to south. The Japanese understand what is happening. Some attempt to return fire, leaning into the ports to shoot at the American they know is outside. Perez simply moves to the next port and kills them while they are exposed. Others retreat from the ports, clustering in the southern section of the interior. This is what Perez has been engineering toward. He shifts his approach angle and begins throwing grenades into the southern ports where the Japanese have concentrated, turning their tactical retreat into a fatal compression. The Japanese attempt to exit the pillbox through the rear entrance. This is the moment Perez has anticipated. As soldiers emerge from the southern door, disoriented by concussion, deafened by explosions, blinded by smoke and dust, Perez engages them with his M1 Garand. He fires from 15 yards, close enough that accuracy is absolute. The first 3 Japanese soldiers through the door go down before they can orient themselves. The 4th manages to raise his rifle. Perez shoots him through the chest. The 5th turns to run back inside. Perez shoots him in the back. The 6th, 7th, and 8th come out together in what might be courage or might be desperation, or might simply be the instinct to escape certain death inside for possible survival outside. Perez kills all 3. No one else comes through the door. Perez waits 17 seconds, his rifle aimed at the opening. Nothing moves. He reloads his Garand with a fresh clip, the distinctive ping of the ejected end block audible even over the ringing in his ears. He circles the pillbox, checking each firing port. The ports are silent. He throws one final grenade through the eastern port, waits for the detonation, then signals Lieutenant Morrison that the position is secure. Company A advances. They find 18 dead Japanese soldiers inside and around the pillbox. Medical personnel examining the bodies later determined that 16 died from fragmentation wounds, grenade concussion, or rifle fire directly attributable to Perez's action. 2 died from wounds that may have been inflicted during the initial exchange before Perez's assault. The after-action report credits Perez with 18 confirmed kills, though this number is almost certainly conservative given the conditions inside the structure and the difficulty of determining which specific injuries caused death. More importantly, they find 12 Filipino civilians alive in a locked interior room, terrified but unharmed. The Japanese had been using them as human shields, gambling correctly that American forces would hesitate to use heavy weapons against a position holding hostages. Perez's precision assault had killed every Japanese defender while leaving the hostages untouched, because he understood something fundamental about geometry and violence. Grenades thrown through firing ports kill people at firing ports, and people retreating from firing ports cluster predictably in the spaces farthest from incoming grenades, spaces that can then be targeted with equal precision. The tactical success is absolute. Company A resumes its advance toward the main Fort McKinley complex within 37 minutes. What took 12 casualties and 43 minutes of stalemate is resolved in under 4 minutes by one soldier with a clear understanding of three-dimensional problem-solving under fire. The rescued civilians are evacuated to safety. The pillbox, which had anchored an entire defensive line, is now in American hands. The casualty estimates for a conventional assault on this position ranged from 30 to 60 men killed or wounded. The actual cost is 0 American casualties during the assault itself, 18 enemy killed, and 12 hostages rescued. Lieutenant Morrison writes up a Silver Star recommendation immediately. This is standard procedure for exceptional valor. The Silver Star is the third highest military decoration for combat valor, significant but not uncommon among airborne units that see regular combat. Morrison describes Perez's action in detailed tactical terms, emphasizing the initiative, the tactical planning, and the successful execution under fire. He sends the recommendation up the chain of command, expecting routine approval. The recommendation comes back 3 days later with a notation that will alter everything. The battalion's quota for Silver Star awards has been filled for the current action period. This is not unusual. The United States military in 1945 operates on an award system that combines recognition of valor with administrative quotas designed to maintain the relative value of decorations. Too many Silver Stars awarded in a single action would, the reasoning goes, diminish the medal's significance. The denial is bureaucratic, not a reflection on Perez's actions. Morrison is furious. He has watched Perez solve an impossible tactical problem, save at least 30 lives, possibly as many as 60 based on casualty projections for alternative assault methods, and rescue 12 hostages, and the military's response is that the paperwork quota is full. He bypasses the normal chain and goes directly to the regimental commander with a new recommendation. If the Silver Star quota is met, Morrison argues, then Perez's actions clearly merit the next level of recognition. He recommends Private First Class Manuel Perez Jr. for the Medal of Honor. The Medal of Honor is different. Established during the Civil War, it is the United States military's highest decoration, reserved for valor above and beyond the call of duty in action against an enemy. Only 3,500 Medals of Honor have been awarded in the nation's entire history by February 1945. The criteria are severe. The action must involve risk of life above and beyond that normally expected in combat. It must be witnessed by at least 2 people, and it must demonstrate extraordinary heroism that clearly distinguishes the act from normal combat valor. The Medal of Honor has no quota. The recommendation begins moving through the review process. Multiple officers examine the action reports. Witnesses provide sworn statements. The tactical situation is analyzed to determine whether alternative solutions existed that would not have required such extreme personal risk. The conclusion, documented in the official Medal of Honor citation, is unambiguous. Perez displayed conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of his life above and beyond the call of duty. The recommendation is approved at every level. On April 21, 1945, the award is officially authorized. Private First Class Manuel Perez Jr. will receive the Medal of Honor for his actions at Fort William McKinley on February 13th. Manuel Perez Jr. never knows any of this. On March 13, 1945, exactly 29 days after his assault on the Pillbox, Perez is killed by a Japanese sniper near Lepa in the Batangas province. The broader tactical situation has shifted dramatically. Manila has fallen. The 11th Airborne Division is conducting mopping-up operations, clearing out isolated pockets of Japanese resistance in the mountains south of the city. These are not supposed to be high-intensity combat operations. The major fighting is over. The outcome is no longer in doubt. The men joke about going home. Perez is on patrol when a single shot cracks across the valley. The bullet hits him in the neck, severing the carotid artery. He bleeds out in less than 3 minutes despite immediate medical attention. The sniper escapes. No Japanese prisoners are taken that day. The official casualty report lists Private First Class Manuel Perez Jr., service number 30,114,630, killed in action on March 13, 1945, in Batangas Province, Republic of the Philippines. He is 21 years old. He has been in the Pacific Theater for 9 months. He has been in the United States Army for 2 years and 4 months. He will be buried in the Fort William McKinley Cemetery, not far from the Pillbox, where he performed the action that earned him the nation's highest military honor. The Medal of Honor is presented posthumously. On a sunny afternoon in Oklahoma City, Perez's parents receive the medal on their son's behalf. His father, Manuel Perez Sr., accepts the award with the stoic dignity of a man who has already lost everything that matters. His mother weeps. The ceremony is formal, respectful, attended by local dignitaries and military officials who speak about sacrifice and heroism, and the debt the nation owes to young men like Manuel Perez Jr. The words are sincere. The sentiments are genuine, and they are completely inadequate to the reality of a 21-year-old factory worker from Chicago who solved a geometric problem with grenades and died a month later when the war was already won. Manuel Perez Jr. becomes the 7th Mexican-American to receive the Medal of Honor in World War II. He will not be the last. By the war's end, 13 Mexican-Americans will have earned the nation's highest decoration, a disproportionately high number given their percentage of the overall military population. The recognition matters. In 1945, Mexican-Americans faced systematic discrimination, segregation, and prejudice throughout much of the United States. They fight not just to defeat fascism abroad, but to prove their loyalty and capability at home. The medals are evidence, impossible to dismiss or ignore, that courage and tactical brilliance have nothing to do with ethnicity or the prejudices of small minds. The story becomes part of military training almost immediately. The tactical problem Perez solved, the geometric precision of his solution, and the methodology he employed are studied at infantry schools and officer candidate programs. The assault on the Fort McKinley Pillbox becomes a case study in individual initiative, tactical problem-solving, and the application of available weapons to exploit structural vulnerabilities. Future officers learn to think about defensive positions the way Perez thought about them, not as impregnable obstacles, but as geometric constructions with inherent flaws that can be identified and exploited by soldiers who understand three-dimensional space and weapons effects. The memorials follow. Fort William McKinley Chapel is renamed Perez Chapel in his honor, a small stone building where Protestant and Catholic services are held for the American garrison that remains in the Philippines until 1991. Schools in Oklahoma City and Chicago bear his name. Parks in Mexican-American neighborhoods across the Southwest feature plaques describing his action. Streets are renamed. Scholarships are established. His name enters the roster of American military heroes, spoken in the same breath as Audie Murphy, Alvin York, and John Basilone. But the truest measure of what Manuel Perez Jr. accomplished has nothing to do with medals or memorials or recognition. The truest measure is silence. The silence of guns that stopped firing because one soldier understood that the pillbox was not a fortress, but a trap waiting to be inverted. The silence of 68 men who did not die in a frontal assault because one soldier saw a geometric solution where everyone else saw only courage and casualties. The silence of 12 Filipino civilians who went home to their families because one soldier calculated angles and blast radii instead of simply attacking. The silence of a cemetery in the Philippines where 18 Japanese soldiers are buried. Young men who died defending a position that was brilliantly engineered until someone thought about it more clearly than the engineers did. War is often described in terms of courage, sacrifice, and heroism. These words are accurate but incomplete. War is also mathematics. War is geometry. War is the application of force through space over time. War is problems that must be solved, and the soldiers who solve those problems most effectively are not always the bravest or the strongest or the most aggressive. Sometimes they are simply the ones who think most clearly under pressure, who see patterns instead of chaos, who understand that courage without precision is just noise and blood. Manuel Perez Jr. worked in a factory before the war. He operated machinery, met production quotas, understood tolerances and specifications. When he looked at the pillbox that had killed 12 of his fellow paratroopers, he saw what he had always seen: a problem with a solution, a structure with vulnerabilities, a process that could be optimized. He did not think about heroism. He thought about angles, timing, and the blast radius of Mark II fragmentation grenades in confined spaces. He solved the problem. Then he moved forward with his unit. Then, 29 days later, he died in a war that was already over, killed by a sniper who probably never knew the name of the American soldier in his sights. This is the story we remember. This is the story we tell. Not because it has a happy ending, it does not, but because it demonstrates something essential about human capability under extreme pressure. When Manuel Perez Jr. crossed 23 yards of open ground under machine gun fire, he was not acting on instinct or adrenaline. He was executing a plan based on careful observation and tactical calculation. When he threw 8 grenades through 18-inch openings in a concrete structure while under fire, he was not relying on luck. He was applying precision and timing learned in a Chicago factory and refined in 9 months of combat. When he killed 18 enemy soldiers in less than 4 minutes, he was not committing an act of rage or revenge. He was solving a tactical problem with the tools available and the clarity of thought that separates effective soldiers from dead ones. The Medal of Honor citation reads, "Private First Class Perez's intrepid actions, his complete disregard for his personal safety, and his extraordinary heroism at the cost of his life above and beyond the call of duty, are in keeping with the highest traditions of military service and reflect great credit upon himself, his unit, and the United States Army." These are the words bureaucracy uses to describe what happened on February 13, 1945. They are formal, appropriate, and insufficient. What happened was simpler and more profound. A young man saw a problem no one else could solve, and he solved it. He saved lives doing it. He died a month later, having never known that his solution would be studied, remembered, and honored for generations. He died believing he had simply done his job. Perhaps that belief, more than the medal or the memorials or the citations, is the truest measure of who Manuel Perez Jr. was. A soldier who did not seek recognition. A tactician who saw clearly when others could not. A 21-year-old factory worker from Chicago who understood that the most important battles are won not by the loudest warriors, but by the clearest thinkers. If you have watched this story to the end, if these 30 minutes have given you even a fraction of the understanding that Manuel Perez Jr.'s sacrifice deserves, I would ask you to do a few things. Subscribe to this channel so we can continue telling stories of extraordinary individuals who changed the course of history through single moments of clarity and courage. Like this video if you believe these stories matter. If you believe that understanding how problems were solved under impossible pressure teaches us something valuable about human capability and sacrifice. And here is the question I would like you to consider, the question you might share in the comments below. In an age of technology and distance warfare, what does Manuel Perez Jr.'s story teach us about the irreplaceable value of individual tactical thinking? What does it mean that one soldier with 8 grenades and clear thought accomplished what heavy artillery and larger forces could not? Share your thoughts. These conversations matter. Manuel Perez Jr. died on March 13, 1945 in the mountains of Batangas province. He was 21 years old. He had been awarded the Medal of Honor 32 days earlier, though he would never know it. He is buried in the Philippines, far from the Chicago factory where he once worked, far from the family who mourned him, close to the ground he helped liberate. His name is remembered. His tactics are studied. His solution to an impossible problem saved 160 lives and proved that clarity of thought, even more than courage, is the warrior's greatest weapon. We remember Private First Class Manuel Perez Jr. not because he sought glory, but because he saw geometry where others saw only death. That vision, in 4 minutes on a February morning, changed everything.